the vice presidential debate tonight. I am joined by my good friend Brent Cooper, who is here with, what was that, peach something or other, peach schnapps and
Yeah.
a little bit of soda.
And Soda Stream.
And soda stream, very nice. And I got myself just a little bit of bourbon here, straight. And we are here to watch the VP debate and hopefully not get too depressed. Let me try to get the audio up a little bit. Oh, this is all just like pre-talk still. And I think we're live all over the place. Maybe YouTube, Twitch. I will be monitoring some of the comments if it works.
At just how liberal Kamala Harris is. She is far to the left of anybody who's been a
We're officially streaming now. We've got the streaming format. Before it was on Zoom. Now we've got like the whole setup here.
Yvette Simpson.
So I don't know.
I have.
What do you say?
Yeah. I have no expectations, of course, with these things. You know, the format always sets it up to fail. And, you know, it's just a shit show. But, you know, we're doing the commentary thing like these people, the commentary on the commentary.
Mm-hmm. We're going to do our best.
So to answer Lindsay's question,
Let this a little bit lower for now. Yeah, we're going to do our best. We'll see what happens. I don't know exactly what a meta-modern or integral commentary, live commentary looks like. I don't think we've really tried it before, but this is going to be an experiment.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I admire the good commentators, right? We were just mentioning, like, Hassan Piker before, and there's so many good ones like the Surfs and, of course, the Michael Brooks Show and the typical lefties who stream and comment on these types of things, like Chapo. I think they do fantastic. It's pretty hard to know all the ins and outs of politics and give good commentary. So, you know, this isn't our typical shtick, and I love to defer to those guys and watch their commentary. But, you know, one thing I realized on Twitter earlier today too is, like, all the right wingers are doing commentary too, like Ben Shapiro, right? So he'll have a take. He's not watching anybody else's commentary. And that's a big part of this, is just the polarization and the different reality tunnels that this event gets filtered through.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks in our community or in our networks, extended, like meta-modernists, integral theorists, meta-thinkers, like a lot of them watch this stuff, but like I don't really see any live commentary beyond what I follow in leftist circles, etc. So it should be interesting. I have to say probably the more entertaining one already occurred.
Yeah.
Presidential debate. I don't think anything could top that this year, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we can expect this one to be a little bit more substantive. Perhaps. Let's hope.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. I don't remember much about the way Pence debates. He's kind of like a classical politician. He's not really nothing to be surprised about. I don't remember Harris very well. Just remember her sniping Biden quite a bit during the primaries. That's really the only thing I remember from her. It should be interesting.
Yeah, she's got pizzazz. She's got a bit of stage presence. Although, as lots of leftist commentators note, you know, she didn't perform great in the primary. You know, she's you know, being foregrounded for political reasons. And, you know, I think, sure, whatever wins, whatever sells with audiences. But the most stark thing is, you know, the shock to the left is they just keep picking all these people that is like, it's like a fuck you, because like, you know, she's a top cop or whatever. And much of the protests this year have been about police brutality, about systemic racism, just general economic inequality, and how that, you know, her failure to prosecute whoever, and Amy Klobuchar's failure to prosecute this Derek Chauvin guy. And, you know, it wouldn't be that hard for the Democratic Party to throw out some olive branches to the socialist movement that wants to be a part of this, wants to support them.
Yeah.
You know, case in point, right? Most of us think that somebody like Nina Turner would have been a better VP choice than Kamala Harris. And you know, a debate like tonight's debate would have been a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
Would have been a lot more substantive. And
Well, I
who
mean,
knows?
Nina Turner, I mean, just having a genuine leftist or progressive, you know, on the ticket would have been substantive. I mean, just a substantive advancement for everything we were trying for. But, you know, but I think with the problem, and I listened to this on Bad Faith podcast earlier today, the issue is that, like, being a centrist, Biden has really have to stick with this sort of middle ground. He can't go too far left, and he can't go too far right. And in that debate, Trump could swing both ways. He could do a hit from the right, and then he could do a populist hit from the left. Even though it's devoid of any kind of substance, he could still hit him with some kind of populist, I don't know, jobs in the Rust Belt, etc. So he could hit those points, and Biden's sort of stuck in the middle here, not really with much substance or defensive ground to actually respond with. And you know, I just intellectually, I think the centrism is just so it's so tenuous to really put that forward.
Yeah.
Here we go, and we're gonna turn this up a little bit and see what happens. If we go down, I guess we could go back up and not play the audio. It's pretty easy to just reset this, so we'll see. But so far, I'm getting the red light means that we're still live, so that's good. All right, so let's turn this up a little bit. Let's get our
those feisty exchanges
drinks
during
ready.
congressional hearings. And tonight she's going to try to
While
argue
we're
the
starting
case
this,
that
I'm going to
this
look up Matt
administration is failing the
Taibbi's
American
drinking
people
game and just
in
see if he
responding
has
to
anything
this crisis.
specifically for us
I'm told not
tonight,
to expect
because
her to
that'd be
spend a lot
hilarious.
of
Yeah,
time
for the
fact-checking.
VPs.
And he said her aim here is
Yeah.
not to eviscerate Mike Pence, but to instead speak directly to the American people about how a Biden
How's the
Harris
audio?
White
Is that
House
low?
will be
Should I
leading
turn it up a little
differently
bit
in this
for
moment. This
YouTube?
is
I
a
think
national
that's
stage
good.
like she
I
has
think
never
that's
been on before, and tonight
good
she's
enough.
going to be making history here. The first black woman, the first Indian American to ever debate for vice president. Regardless of politics, George, this is a huge moment for women, especially for young girls across this country.
And we will see how she plays on that tonight. Rachel Scott, let me bring you in as well. Mike Pence has done this before 4 years ago against Tim Kaine. Did pretty well 4 years ago. Has a very different job tonight.
The fact of the matter is, George,
Do you
this
remember
is not
Tim Kaine?
2016. And
Does
right
anybody
now, we're
remember
facing
Tim Kaine?
Vaguely.
an unprecedented pandemic. And Vice President Mike Pence is the head of the coronavirus.
thought of
I
that,
remember,
He put on
yeah,
defense tonight.
I
He will
remember
have to
thinking
defend
that,
the
you know, he's so
administration's handling of this
forgettable that he
pandemic.
was
I'm told that
definitely
he
a
will
bad
largely focus on
choice
recovery,
and
talk about
definitely
jobs, talk about the
impacted
economy bouncing
Clinton
back.
losing.
But the reality here is that 26 million Americans
Wasn't
are
he a
out of a job,
Catholic?
and he will be
Was
facing
that
some
one of the
tough
things they
questions
were
on that
talking
front,
about?
George.
Right,
Remember
the
that.
president has gone back
That
and
Probably.
forth on the stimulus, the economic
Yeah.
relief
Yeah.
package over the last 24 hours. That is the stage right there. Moderator Susan Page will be speaking in just a few moments, outlining her goals for the debate, talking about the rules that she will be laying out as well. Everyone else in that hall wearing a mask tonight, unlike
here
what
we
we
go.
saw in Cleveland last week. Here's Susan Page.
Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only vice presidential debate
Is
of
that? Do you see that
2020,
back in the bottom
sponsored
left
by the
there?
Nonpartisan
It looks like
Commission
someone's
on
head.
Presidential debates.
Just
I'm
like
Susan Page of USA
Hold on.
Today. It is my honor to moderate this
Oh
debate,
yeah, I
an
think I
important
see
part
it.
of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please
Please
welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
So, how many people are going to get coronavirus from this debate?
Thank you.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on
Speaking
behalf
of rules,
of the
let me
millions
look
of
up
Americans who are watching.
Matt
One
Taibbi's
note,
rules here.
no one in either campaign
In the Discord, I sent you a different article for drinking game for VPs.
Questions I'll ask.
Oh, let me check it out.
This
Oh,
90-minute
did we
debate will
lose
be
that?
divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator
Like that
Harris,
plexiglass
the
right there?
coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week,
Could be a little
Johns
bigger.
Hopkins reports
Yeah.
that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000
Pence is like, I
dead
take
people in our
exception to
country
that.
in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last...
She's kind of wasting her time not answering the question.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. On January 28th,
I was kind of hoping she would just be
the Vice
more
President and the President were informed
doing what Biden can't
about the
do
nature of
and
this
just like
pandemic. They were
Right,
informed
being a
yeah,
good
being the
rhetorician,
counterpoint.
Yeah, being a
that it is
counterpoint,
airborne,
quick on her feet.
that it will affect young people, and that it would
Yeah.
be contracted because it is airborne.
She's kind of just fear mongering, like she's probably not meaning to, but that's what it sounds like, and it sounds very
Can you
scripted.
imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th,
Because that's
what they
definitely
knew, what you
not
might have
what
done to prepare?
Biden needs.
They knew and they
you know,
covered it
I
up.
mean, like
The president said it was a hoax.
she's already going up
Minimize the
against
seriousness
somebody
of it.
who's going
The
to be
president
equally
said,
scripted.
You're on one side of his
Looking and
ledger,
shaking
Yeah.
his head. He's
you're
like,
on the other side
no,
of
you
his
see,
ledger
you see,
if you don't.
Mrs. Howard, this
And
is simply
in
not
spite of
true.
all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They
Yeah,
still
Mike
don't
Pence
have
has a bit
plan.
of
Joe
a
Biden does. And our plan
not
is
sorted,
about
but
what
very
we need to do around a
reactionary
national
history, right?
Yes.
Like he,
for
for a
contact
while,
tracing,
he
for
was
testing,
like
for
a
administration
radio
of the
person,
vaccine,
you know,
and
like
making
you
sure
know,
that it
like
would be
like
free
Alex
for
Jones
all.
in a sense. Like he would
That
just
is
give
the
his
plan
opinion.
that Joe
and
Biden has and that I have,
So,
knowing that we have
he
to
knows how to
control
talk.
what
You
has
wouldn't
been
think so
going
by
on, and we
looking
need to
at him,
save our country,
but he can
and Joe Biden is
spin a
the best
yarn,
leader
I'm
to do
sure.
that, and
Yeah.
frankly, this administration has
I think a lot of radio
forfeited
guys, you'd be
their right to
surprised just looking
re-election
at them.
based on this.
You know,
Thank you,
it's
Senator
more about
Harris.
the voice.
Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher
A lot
than
of
that
people
almost
didn't like
every other
the
wealthy nation on
SNL
Earth.
episode last
For
weekend, and
instance,
I
our
agree
death rate
SNL
is
as a
2.5
whole isn't that
times
great, but I
Canada
really
next
liked
door.
Jim Carrey's
You head
Biden.
the administration's coronavirus task force.
I saw some clips.
Why is the U.S.
Yeah, that was
Jim,
good.
yeah, I just
as
saw
a
the
percentage
clips.
of
Yeah,
our
Jim
population
Carrey is legend.
higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for
I want to thank
hosting this
everybody.
event.
Thank.
And, Senator Harris,
Yeah,
it's a privilege to
thank
be
my
on
wife.
stage with you. Our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know.
2020, am I right?
First day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision.
Wasn't that a little too little, too late?
Xenophobic,
Yeah,
hysterical.
you know, not to defend them at all, but you know, it occurs to me that everybody was pretty late to react and respond to it adequately, because like, if you recall, February and early March, like peak debate hysteria, or you know, the president, the primary debates, but just the campaigns in general kind of overshadowed any other issues. So that's something Bernie could have been a bit more proactive on as well. Just
and to develop medicines and therapeutics have been saving lives all
take the
along
lead
way.
in terms of healthcare, the narrative, but he did, but nobody was talking about shutting things down until things actually shut down.
Yeah. And what I heard too is that they, in terms of the timing and the transmission, actually the virus entering the United States was through Europe. And by the time it reached us, it was coming in through Europe.
Okay.
So, and then at that time, we cut off travel with China. So it's like too little, too late. It's already traveled around the world.
It's a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first.
I love the like reactions, like, "Oh, you son of a gun, you!"
I'm proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country,
Just stick to
American
that.
lives
Just keep
that have
hammering
been
that
lost,
number.
families that are grieving that loss. And you know,
There's always these types of things that could happen in any presidency. Like Obama's presidency didn't necessarily have anything like this, but it had other things, you know. And when I talk about like fascism in the country, that applies to things like the pipeline, the military response to that. Like people, it's equally offensive no matter who does it.
So I want to ask the American people.
But you know, Obama's on the left, Trump's on the right, so things get kind of spun like only Trump is fascist. When I call them fascist, I never mean just those kinds of things under that presidency, because these things happen all the time.
Vice President, you have 1 minute to respond.
Who knows what the death count would be with a different president in the U.S.? That's what I'm saying, because it's the healthcare system itself.
Right. It's more of a systemic problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not just
the American people have
the sitting
done
president.
over these last 8 months hasn't worked. That's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, the reality is, Dr. Fauci said, everything that he told the president in the Oval
I would say
Office, the
making up
president
our own
told the
rule
American
about the
people.
reality is, I'm sure
Trump, I will tell
Pence
you,
is going to
has
say
boundless
that a lot,
confidence in the American
but
people, and he always
I'm
spoke with
afraid that we
confidence
might
that
get
we through this
really
together.
hammered if we
But when you
add
say
that.
it hasn't worked, when
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy,
Sorry
that
about
we
that.
could lose 2.2
Apparently I can't switch
million Americans.
Windows
That's
here.
the
I gotta
reality.
leave this up.
Thank you.
He also said to us, if we did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
Now, one
Pence.
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first
Thank you, Vice
responders.
President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials.
So
No
embarrassing.
social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
It's a good question.
Well, the
It's a very
American
good question.
people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us.
He said the reality is. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to start following
if I may say, that Rose Garden event.
that role.
There's a bingo thing too. It's a little easier to follow.
Many of the people who were at that event
Let me actually
were tested for
get your
coronavirus.
link.
And it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely
Get that
advise.
open.
The difference here is President Trump and
Is that the link you
trust
sent
the
me?
American people to make choices. in
I
best
don't
interest
see it
of
on the
their
screen.
Health.
Let's
Joe
see.
Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates,
Yeah.
and not just mandates with the
Let's see here.
coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you. Thank
the
you very
Green
much.
New Deal, all government
LOL.
control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk
Drink
about
when
respecting the
Pence
American people.
talks about how he's a
You
Christian.
respect the American people when you tell them the truth.
Drink twice if he
respect the
explicitly
American
described
people when
himself
you have
as
the
a Christian,
courage
conservative,
leaders
and Republican
speaking
in that
of
order.
those things that you may not want
Mentions
people
mother,
to hear, but they need to
as
hear
in
so
his
they can
wife,
protect
not his actual mother.
themselves.
Oh my goodness.
But this administration
Shakes his head
stood
while
on
Harris
information
criticizes
that
Trump.
If you had
Definitely.
as a parent, if you had as a worker,
Restoring
knowing you didn't
advice.
have enough
Very
money
good.
saved up, and now
And
you're
how about
standing
Harris?
in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration
Joe
that was
Biden
unwilling to
criticizes
speak the
Pence on his
truth to
record as the head of the
American people.
coronavirus task
So let's
force.
talk about caring about the American
Says
people.
nobody's
The
above the
American
law.
people have had to
Okay.
sacrifice far
We're
too
not up to
much
that yet, but
because
sure.
of the incompetence of this administration.
Pence and
It is
Trump's
asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked about
his
that.
own
It is
COVID
asking too much
diagnosis.
of the people. That they would not be
That's the
equipped with
unfortunate thing about
information
Trump
they need
seeming to do
to
well.
help
Like, I kind of
themselves to
expected
protect
this
their
man to be
parents and
invincible.
their
Like,
children.
it either would go
Senator
really
Harris,
bad
I'm sorry.
for him,
Fine,
or
no,
he would
no,
just,
Senator Harris
nothing
to
would
me.
happen at all. And that seems
For
to
life
be
get back
Yeah.
to normal.
his
Dr.
luck.
Anthony Fauci and other
But
experts
that's like his
say
luck. He's
that
just
most of
like
the people
able
who
to
can be
brush
vaccinated
everything
need
off.
to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now
Yeah,
say they wouldn't
and
take
you know
the vaccine
Bolsonaro
if it was
and Boris
released now.
Johnson both
Trump
got it and
administration
survived,
approved the
and so
vaccine
it's
before
kind of
after
I'm
the
kind of
election.
expecting
Should Americans
just
take it and
the
would you
same
take it?
pattern to
If
emerge
the
here. Like these
public health
elites
professionals, if
can't
Dr.
get sick.
Fauci,
You know,
if
as
the
Matt Christman would say, they have too much
doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be
adrenochrome.
first in line to take it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But if Donald
Too much
Trump tells us I
adrenochrome.
should take- that we
Isn't
should
that
take it, I'm
the
not taking it.
what do you
Vice
call it? The
President Pence, there
QAnon
have been a
thing?
lot of repercussions from this pandemic.
I
In recent days,
I
the
guess it's
president's
I guess
diagnosis
that's
of
part of it.
COVID-19 has underscored the importance
I think
of the job
you
that
know
you
I don't
hold
know
and
exactly
that
how
you
it
are
works,
seeking.
but
That's our second
narratively
topic
they
tonight.
kind of blow it
It's
out
the
of
role
proportion.
of the vice
Adrenochrome
president.
for them is like this
Many
like
of you will make
elixir of
history on
life, or
January 20th.
you know.
will be the vice president to
it's like drinking the
oldest
blood of
president the
innocence.
United States
Yeah.
has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old.
I
on
appreciate,
Inauguration Day.
Chrisman's,
Joe Biden will be 78 years old.
impassioned rants
That
on
already has raised
his like
concerns
YouTube
among
streams
some
are just
voters,
fantastic.
Concerns that have been sharpened
They're a thing
by
to behold.
President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that
There
we're
we
going
go.
to have a vaccine,
He loves saying that.
Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now
it's a
producing
fair
tens of millions of
ish
doses.
point,
So
but not for the reasons they're
the fact
talking
that you
about. Like, it's
continue
not
to
like
undermine public confidence in a
we're in an
vaccine,
unheard of time.
if the vaccine
This is
emerges
so
during the Trump
unexpected. This is
administration, I think
so
is
we were so unprepared for this because the gravity of this situation is a once in 100-year thing. Nobody could be ready for it. Whereas really, like your comment earlier was, we could have been more prepared and more ready for it. And there's plenty of cases across the planet, different nations that were more prepared for dealing with it. It's just that systemically, between our healthcare system, our infrastructure, et cetera, we were uniquely unprepared for it as a nation, right?
When you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009.
Oh,
the swine
God, bringing
flu
up
arrived
that.
in the United States.
Was that in one of the lists?
Thankfully,
Was that in the list?
Ended up
bringing up the swine flu, bringing up
as the coronavirus. But before
the
end
last
of the
crash.
Year, when Joe Biden was vice president of
No,
the
but
United
it
States,
should be.
not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu.
Is
If
that
the swine
true?
flu had been as lethal
60
as the
million?
That's a lot of people.
coronavirus in 2009,
Jesus.
when Joe Biden was
Just
vice
like a live
president, we would have lost 2
fact checker
million
during this.
Fact checker.
American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year
Let's see.
that it was
Let's
pure
see.
luck
60 million
that they did, quote,
Americans.
everything possible wrong.
Swine flu.
And we learned from that.
We're still
They left the
bringing up
strategic
swine
national
flu.
stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we
Thank you,
still
Vice
learned
President
from it.
Pence.
And I think
Vice
the
President
American
Pence.
I guess
people,
we're gonna
and
have to
I
wait
say
and
again,
find
can be
out.
Vice
proud
President Pence, I'm sorry,
of
your
what
time
we
is
have
up.
done. And Senator, please
Thank you, Vice
stop
President
undermining
Pence.
confidence in a vaccine.
Oh,
Senator
let's
Harris,
check
let
this.
me ask you the same question
Back from
that I
August.
asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you
I
had
have
a
ad blocker.
conversation
Sorry.
or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden?
not
Well,
letting me in.
yeah,
Safeguards
it said
or
it was
procedures
said it's
when
true
it comes to the
basically,
issue
but it's
of
killed
presidential
fewer people
disability?
than
And if you're
COVID.
not, and if you win the election next month, do you think
Makes sense.
you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you first.
That's
of
a
all,
lot of people, though.
The day I
Yeah,
got
that is.
the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking
Zoom
me
in
to
with Joe.
serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people.
boy.
And I think Joe asked
It's
me
so
to serve with
boring
him
that it's
because
cringe.
I know.
I have a career that included being elected the
But this
first
is what we were
woman
saying.
district
Like,
attorney
what we
in
really
San
need is a
Francisco,
response to
where I
to
created
Pence as
models
somebody
of
who is
innovation
Yeah.
quick on their
for law
feet, quick
enforcement in
thinker,
terms
good
of reform of the criminal
rhetorician,
justice system. I was
improviser,
elected,
Yeah.
sharpshooter.
the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice.
And to be honest, I
And
mean, I
there
don't think
took
this
on
is going to sway.
everything from transnational
As
criminal
we've seen in the
organizations
polls, right?
to
Like,
the
I
big
think,
banks
what,
that were taking
6% or
advantage of
less of the
homeowners,
last
to for-profit colleges
debate,
that were
like
taking
6%
advantage
or
of
less were
veterans.
undecided.
And then, of course, now I
Something
serve in the
along those
United
lines.
States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate.
Yeah, I'm
Intelligence
holding to
Committee,
my
where I
prediction.
regular
No matter
receipt
what
of
happens, that it's
classified
basically
information
a coin
about
toss.
threats to our nation
This
and hotspots
election,
around
like
the
there's just
world. I've
no
traveled
way to
the
predict
world.
it.
I've met
People are
with our
crunching the
soldiers
numbers
in
and
our-
stuff, but
in
they
war
did that
zones.
last
And I think Joe
election,
has asked
and
me to
it
serve
didn't.
with him
It just
because he knows
it's
that
not
we
accurate.
Yep.
None
we
of the
share a purpose,
modeling
which is about
is
lifting
really
up the American
useful,
people. And
other
after
than
the
trying
4
to
years that
influence
we have
like
seen
what
of
you
Donald Trump
want it to be,
unifying our
or
country around our common values
how you want to parse
Thank
the
you, Senator
data. But
Harris.
really, you
neither
can't predict it.
President Trump nor Vice President Biden
No,
has released
you know,
sort of detailed
I was
health
listening to a
information
couple of different
that had
streams
become the
about
modern
this,
norm
and
until the 2016 election.
the polls are
And in
just
recent
they're
days,
not
President Trump's doctors
really
have
that. I
given
mean,
misleading
sure, they
answers or refused to answer
might give us a
basic
good
questions
idea
about
of what's
his health.
going on,
And my
but
question to each of you
after
in turn
2016,
is,
I don't
is
really
this
think I don't
information
personally trust
voters
the polls
deserve
in terms
to
of
know?
like sure
Vice President
outcomes.
Pence, would you like to go first?
Well,
I've heard,
Susan, thank you.
like for
And,
instance, Biden is doing a
let
little
me-
better
let me
in
say,
states like Florida.
On behalf of the
So
president,
that's interesting. But again,
First
like in
Lady,
the difficult
how
states
moved we've
beyond
all
Florida, I think
by
he's
the
pretty
outpouring
close
of
in the polls anyway.
prayers and concern
So
for the president. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted
was that one of the rules?
by the
Prayers.
coronavirus. But the care the president
Pence.
received at Walter Reed Hospital the White
No.
House doctors was exceptional.
Come on,
And
prayers.
the transparency that they practiced all the way
These games aren't always that accurate. Like one of the Joe Biden ones I saw, like it didn't even have "here's the deal" on it. And Biden
could
said
you?
"here's the deal" like numerous times in that
more than a
debate.
little moved, by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to
reaching
be on
across
this
the
stage
aisle.
4 years ago, so I know the
Good
feeling.
sportsmanship.
But
Yeah.
the reality is,
The
we've got
reality
an
is.
election
But the reality is,
before the American people.
I will
in the
do
midst of
everything in
this
my
challenging
power to
year.
destroy you.
And the stakes have never been higher. and I think the
Thank you,
choice
Vice
has never been
President Pence.
clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more
Yeah, sorry,
detailed
this is
health
definitely not
information
as
about
amusing as
presidential candidates, and especially about
the
presidents,
shit show that was
especially when they're facing some kind of
was
challenge.
the presidential
Absolutely,
debate.
and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first
He's
heard about
shaking
it,
his head a little bit.
I literally said, "You mean
Anybody who's following the game, that's one of them.
$750,000?" And it was
Yeah.
like, no, $750.
That counts.
We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right
I don't have a lot of faith
what is
when they try to
influencing
lean
the
into
president's
whatever the
decisions, and
news
is he
cycle
making
is
those
saying,
decisions
you
out of
know,
the best
like
interest of the
she's doing,
American
like the New
people?
York Times reports,
Or
Trump paid
self-interest.
$750 in
Susan, I'm
taxes,
glad
and then it's a talking point
because it
for a
has to be
week,
across the board.
but then
Joe has
it
been
doesn't
incredibly
hold
transparent
weight.
over
Trump
Yeah.
just
many,
wriggles out of
many
it
years. The one
and
thing
says
we
that's a
all know
lie, and
about
it
Joe,
may or may
he
not be
puts it
right,
all
but
out
it's
there.
like
He
the
is
reporting
honest, he
isn't
is
helping the
forthright.
narrative here.
But Donald
Right.
Trump, on the other
I mean,
hand,
you
has
kinda
been
wonder,
covering
like,
up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I
What
want to
this is
give you a
going to
chance
look like when
respond,
he's
Vice
out of
President.
office.
Well,
Like,
look,
is
I
anything
respect
going to
the fact
stick
that, Joe Biden spent 47
at that
years in
point, or
public
is
life.
this just
Yeah.
going to all drop away because
Public
there's no
service
more?
as well.
Thank you.
The American
Pressure.
people
I think
have
it's going to
chosen
drop away if you
businessman,
trust the cynical
job
left,
creator.
like Matt Christman.
Yeah, yeah.
He's observing that all the liberals are rehabilitating him like they did Bush, right? They're ready to embrace these guys, and like once you've been president, it's like you're immune from prosecution or criticism, and you just get whitewashed
You
and
just become
lionized.
like an American treasure. You just
Yeah.
that Joe Biden, 47 years.
One of the things that
public
boggles my
service compared to
mind is that,
President Donald Trump,
there's a
brought all that
couple
experience forward.
documentaries about Trump on
Turned
Netflix,
this economy around
and
by
it's
cutting
not
taxes,
like
rolling back regulation,
Thank you.
propaganda. It's a little bit of
fighting for free and
investigative
fair trade,
journalism, and it's like,
all
this is
that
what happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s. This is what
That's a
Trump has
good
been
segue
doing.
into our third
But it
topic,
doesn't-
which is about the economy. This has
It
been
doesn't
another
affect
aspect
public
of
opinion
life
that
for
much. It
Americans
seems
that's
like
been affected
people who
by
defend
this
Trump
coronavirus.
won't
We
even
have a
watch them.
jobs crisis
They're like,
brewing.
oh,
On
Netflix
Friday, we learned that the
documentary. Oh,
unemployment rate had declined to
that's
7.9%
obviously
in
bullshit.
September, but the job growth
But
has
Yeah.
I
stalled,
don't know.
and that
When
was
you
before the
watch it,
latest
it's
round of
obviously
layoffs and furloughs
somewhat
in the airline industry at
substantive.
Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of
Typically,
discouraged
I mean,
workers have stopped looking for work.
that's the thing with this
Nearly
whole media
11
cycle
million jobs that
past couple
existed at the
years.
beginning
Like,
of the year haven't
every
been
few months there's
replaced.
something
Those
that is going
hardest
to
hit
take
include
down
Latinos,
Trump.
blacks,
There's
and
just
women.
some kind of new
Senator Harris, the
revelation.
Biden-Harris
There's some kind of
campaign has
new,
proposed new programs to boost the economy,
even
and
the
he would pay for
impeachment.
that.
Even the impeachment. I mean,
He's
like he's
spending
gone
by
through
raising
everything.
$4 trillion
There's
in
Comey.
taxes
There's
on wealthy
there's somebody who's
individuals and
going to
corporations.
testify, and then he's going to
Some
have to
economists
step
warn
down,
that
and
could
nothing
curb
happens.
entrepreneurial ventures
And it really
that
kind of
fuel
shows.
growth
I
and
mean,
create jobs.
you
Would
kind of
raising
wonder if a different
taxes put the
president were in
recovery
office,
at
if they
risk? And you have
would
2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
adhere to the rule of law and actually have to like follow through
on the issue of
some
the
kind of
economy, I
proceeding or
think there
hearing,
couldn't
and then
be a more
actually
fundamental
maybe
difference
have to step
between
down
Donald
because
Trump
they're
and Joe
they're
Biden.
acknowledging the formalities
Joe
of the
Biden
political
believes you
process.
measure the health
But
and the strength of
if
America's
it really is
economy
that flimsy,
based on the
you know,
health
like
and the
if you could
strength
just say,
of the
nah,
American
I'm
worker
not going to show up to
and
that,
the
no
American
thank you.
family.
Yeah.
On the other
Just-
hand, you have
I don't
Donald
know.
Trump,
It's just
who
like
measures the strength of the the economy.
I'm
based
deeply
on how
cynical
rich
about
people are doing.
anything toppling this guy,
Which is why
besides
he
voting him
passed a
out,
tax bill
Yeah,
benefiting
yeah.
the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable
Joe
energy.
Biden hates the Green New
Joe
Deal.
is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when
As
our
long as
country
they
believed
do
in
it,
science
actually, you know,
and
I don't care what you
invested in
call
research
it,
and development, so that we were
package
an innovation
of
leader on the
policies.
globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example,
Yeah,
for folks who want to go
I
to
mean,
a
as
two-year
long as they're
community
doing
college,
something,
it will be
obviously,
free.
like,
If you
even
come
the Green
from a
New Deal is
family that
not
makes
enough
less than
to deal with the
$125,000,
climate crisis
you'll
as
go
it
to a
stands
public
right now. But,
university for
Yeah.
free.
you know,
And
if he
across the
slaps a new
board, we'll
name on
make
it,
sure that
the
if
new
you have
Biden deal
student
or
loan
something,
debt, it's cut by $10,000.
calls it something else and
That's
does
how
some
Joe
elements
Biden
of
thinks
it that
about
are
the
like
economy, which is
somewhat
it's
good,
about
better than
investing
nothing.
in the people of our country,
Yeah,
as
the
opposed to
the
passing a
challenge
tax bill,
for people
which
like
had the
us,
benefit
like
of
what we're
letting American
advocating for,
corporations go
things like
offshore
UBI,
to do
you
their
know, jobs
business.
guarantee, which is part of the
Thank
Green
you,
New Deal,
Senator
the
Harris.
latter.
Vice President Pence, your
Like in
administration is
reality,
predicting
politically, these
rapid
things
and
could
robust
be
recovery.
decades away,
But the
and
latest
we're saying, well,
economic
we need
report
them
suggests
now,
that's not
so
happening.
why not just do it
Should
now?
Americans be
Right?
braced for an
Even
economic
though it's
comeback
like
that is gonna
a
take 9
great
months,
idea,
a
it's what the
year,
world
or
needs.
more? You have
There's
2
not the
minutes to answer
political will from
uninterrupted.
these establishment
When President Trump and I
types.
took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. It's when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy.
You know, there is plenty
President
to
Trump cut taxes across the board.
there's plenty to criticize
Despite what,
the Obama
Senator
administration
Harris
for
says,
how they handled
the
that
average American
crash.
family of 4 had
And
$2,000
the largest
in
transfer of
savings
wealth,
and
I think,
taxes.
in history up
And
to that point.
with the
But
rise in
guess what
wages
just
that
happened this
occurred,
year
most
under
predominantly for
Trump's
blue-collar,
administration,
hardworking Americans.
right? It wasn't this one.
Greater
the-
tax cuts.
For a family of 4
Yeah.
increased by
There.
$4,000
Yeah.
following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one,
Yeah, it's
Joe
mind-boggling
Biden's gonna
that,
raise your taxes.
you know, we
It's
have
remarkable
Occupy
things that
9 years
happened
ago,
right after
and
a time
you know
when we went
the
through a pandemic that
the
lost 22
haters
million
of
jobs
things like
behind.
that would say
We've
like,
already
oh, they
added
don't
back
have a
11.6 million
they don't have a
jobs
unified message.
because
They don't
we
have
had
a
a president who
clear
cut taxes,
platform,
rolled back
you know.
regulation,
So let's
unleashed
ignore them.
American
And
energy,
but
fought for free
while
and fair
acknowledging
trade.
inequality
It
as a
secured
problem,
$4 trillion from the Congress
and
of the
then
United
so
States
that
to
movement
give
is
direct payments
suppressed.
to
But
families,
between now
save
and
50
between then
million
and
jobs through
now,
the Paycheck
things have
Protection
gotten worse.
Program. We literally have spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors
I love that,
of in
like,
the United
grinning
States Senate. They want to
head shake.
abolish fossil fuels
Wow.
and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands
She
of
wasn't
American jobs all across
a
the
co-signer.
No.
I don't. Does she even support it? It's funny that Pence would even phrase it like that.
Was with China alone.
You know, they just
Yeah.
keep putting these things like, oh, you're a socialist, you support the Green New Deal, blah blah blah. And then they're like, no, that's not even true.
They have.
Make
I
no
mean,
mistake
that's
about
the
it,
sad.
Susan.
It's a great
The
tactic
American economy, the
for
American
both
comeback
Trump and
is
Pence
on the ballot.
to
4
accuse
more years of growth.
Thank you.
accuse the
opportunity, 4
Biden
more
ticket
years of
as
President Donald
socialist,
Trump.
because then they will
2021
punch
is
left.
the biggest economic year
They'll
in the
just have
history
to
of this
punch
country.
left. Like,
Thank
I
you,
hate
Vice President
socialists.
Pence.
I'm no
Senator
socialist. I
Harris.
hate the Green New
Well,
Deal.
I mean,
I'd kill it.
Yeah.
They have to say
I
stuff
see.
like that on air, and then
Yeah. So you mean it's a great tactic because it's like a bait, like it sets up them to punch left and actually hurt themselves.
yeah, it secures their own base, right? Because there's nothing to
Yeah.
win anyone over by saying like, you know, they're red
speaking.
commies, and then it hurts their base in terms of like the actual progressive populists that are being totally alienated in this
That was
experience,
tax cuts that gave the
just like
average
being
American
disowned
family
left and right.
$2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he
tax
only
bill,
cutting? Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
if you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay.
It's gonna be like
Joe
clipped,
Biden will not raise
retweeted
taxes
everywhere.
on anyone who makes less
Yeah.
than $400,000
Slay
a
queen.
year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was
You know,
responsible
if they get the
Recovery
Republican
Act
voters,
that brought America back.
great.
And now that Trump
That's
Pence
what they're going
administration
for
wants to
here.
take credit,
But that's what
when
Pence
they
is
ran-
fighting
when they
for
rode
too.
the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term.
This
Of
is
course, now
all
the economy
about
is a
the on-the-fence
complete
Republican
disaster.
voters.
But Joe
Both
Biden, on
parties
the
have
one
decided
hand, did
that.
that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the
What do
one
you think
hand,
of,
you have Joe Biden,
Crystal
who was
Ball's analysis
responsible
with this,
President
just, you
Barack
know,
Obama
which her
for the
analysis of
Affordable
the
Care
recent
Act,
polls was that,
which
like,
brought health care to over 20 million Americans and
Trump-
protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did
his handling
is
of the
it saved
pandemic
those
and then now
families
of the
who otherwise
economic
were going
crisis
bankrupt
is
because of
just
hospital bills they could
too
not
much
afford.
for
On
a
the
lot
other
of
hand,
these
you have Donald
conservative
Trump, who's
voters
in
to
court
actually
right
like
now,
stick
trying to
with,
get
right?
rid
Like
of-
that
Thank you,
he's
Susan.
actually
trying to
going
get
to
rid
lose
of the
significantly
Affordable Care Act,
because
which means that
the
you will
conservative
lose
voters on
protections
the
if you have
conservative left, the
pre-existing
center
conditions, and I
centrist
just- this is very
left,
important,
and then
Susan.
Yes,
you
and
know
it's- we need to
moderately
give it- we need to
conservative
give
right
Vice
are
President-
both
just
kind
like
of like
he
this
interrupted
isn't
me,
this
and
hasn't
I'd like
really
to
been
just finish,
handled well,
please.
Mr. President. Let's really kind of just
If
pick
you
this
have a
Biden guy
pre-existing
and,
condition,
and have
heart
someone
disease,
competent
diabetes, breast
administer the
cancer,
crisis. You
they're
know.
coming for you. If you love
Yeah.
someone who has a pre-existing condition,
Thank
they're
you, Senator
coming for
Harris.
you.
I haven't seen her analysis lately, but I think
Senator
it's
Harris,
it's
thank you. Let me give
there's
you a
certainly a
chance
lot
to
of
respond.
Republicans have
we
been
had a chance to talk about
dissenting
healthcare
from
because
Trump,
Obamacare was a
but the question is how
American
influential
people
are they
remember it well.
on voters?
Yeah.
You know?
President Trump
And
had a
I don't think very
plan
much.
to improve healthcare and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the
That
Green
doesn't sound like something Joe Biden would say.
No, it does not.
Really wasn't that very different from the original Green
But
New
again,
Deal.
they have to like,
More
punch left now
taxes,
and be like,
more regulation,
no, we love fossil
banning
fuels. What?
fracking,
Are you kidding me?
crushing fossil fuel,
Yeah.
crushing American energy, and
I love
economic
Exxon.
surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President.
You could just
Pence. Once
fire back.
again,
I mean,
you
what about
provided the
Trump
perfect segue
dropping
to
any
a
kind
new
of
topic, which is
deal in the
climate
House
change.
for
And
a
Vice
stimulus
President
package
Pence, I'd like to pose the first
until
question
after the
to
election?
you.
That just happened.
This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the south. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the west. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates,
Scott
our
Pruitt
air and land are
was
cleaner than any time ever recorded.
chosen as the head
Our
of the
water is
EPA,
more clean than
and he's a
Just a little while ago,
anti-environmentalist.
the president
Yeah.
signed the Outdoors Act. It's the
Very
largest
proud of that. Very
investment
proud
in
of that.
public lands and public
I remember in
parks
2016,
100 years.
I listened to Ben Shapiro's podcast occasionally because he was like a conservative that wasn't for Trump, right? So I was like, okay, this is,
The issue
you know,
is,
it's got some interesting
what's the
takes.
cause and what do we do about
But
it?
he would do this thing.
President
He'd
Trump
be
has
like
been clear
good
we're
Trump,
gonna
bad
continue
Trump,
to
and he
listen
would
to
like
science.
list out the
Now,
things that are
Joe
good and
Biden
bad. And
Kamala Harris
some of the good
pushed back
things
on
were,
Paris
you know, the
Climate
cabinet
Accord. They
picks. It's
imposed
like,
the Green
oh
New
yeah,
Deal,
you know,
which would crush
what's her
American
name?
energy,
Betsy DeVos,
increase the
right?
energy costs of
It's like,
American
yeah, Betsy DeVos and
families
Scott Pruitt, you know,
and
good picks.
homes,
Trump
and
making
literally
good
would
picks.
crush American jobs.
And it's like, if you do a little bit of
President Trump and I
research,
believe that
it's like these
the
are
progress that
horrible,
we have
rich
made in a
assholes
cleaner
that
environment
don't like. They're
has been
not
happening
helping
precisely
people,
because
they're
we
not
have
helping
a
the
strong
environment. They're not
free market
reforming
economy.
education in any
You
good
know,
way.
what's remarkable is the United States
Yeah.
has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation, and we've done it through natural gas and fracking which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly
like,
committed to abolishing fossil fuel and
Biden
banning
is a fracker all the way.
And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists use hurricanes and wildfires to try and sell their bill of goods of a Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put American jobs and American workers first.
This is like,
Senator Harris,
my
as
frustration
the Vice
with
President
this
mentioned, you co-sponsored the
is
Green
just
New Deal
that,
in
like,
Congress.
if you're going
But
to
Vice President Biden said in last
advocate
week's
for
debate that he
progressive
does not support the Green New
policies
Deal.
like the Green New
But if
Deal,
you look
you
at the
need to lean in
Biden-Harris
all the
campaign
way
website,
and really
it
argue
describes
for
the Green
why
New Deal
they're
as a
important.
crucial framework.
You need to
What
decimate
exactly
the
would be the
opposition in
stance of a
terms of like
Biden-Harris administration
any of the positions
toward
that
the
Pence just
Green New
made right
Deal?
now.
You have
Like
2
all of
minutes
that
Yeah.
needs to be deconstructed,
So,
and you
first
need
of
to
all,
positively
This-
advocate
yeah.
for like this new
And the
vision
American
of
people
well,
know
we need to
that
rebuild
Joe
the
Biden
economy,
will not ban
rejuvenate the
fracking.
Rust Belt,
That is a
create all of
fact.
these new energy jobs.
That
Like
is a fact.
really, I mean, it's almost straightforward.
Repeat
Like make it a
that
populist
Yeah.
Joe
message.
Biden has been very clear
Yeah, this is
that he
Kamala's
thinks
chance.
about
She was
growing
asked
jobs,
a
which is
Green New
why
Deal
he will not
question.
increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald
Reputable
Trump.
Wall Street
And
firm.
part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be
Oh,
about
God.
So
clean
much for
energy,
What a
thing to say.
because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed
Even
because of floods.
back in
And so
2016,
Joe believes, again, in
you know,
science. I'll tell you
myself
something,
and lots
Susan.
of
I served when I
leftists,
first
you know,
got to the
admired
Senate on the
Trump's
committee that's responsible for the
ability to
environment.
just
You
cut
know,
through
this
bullshit. Even though he's
administration
he's full of
took
shit,
the word science off the
he could cut
website
through a lot of other people's
and then
bullshit,
took
right? He
the
took
phrase
down all the other
climate change
Republicans.
off the website.
That's what we need
We
on the
have seen a
left.
pattern
Yeah.
with this administration, which is they don't believe in science.
And you know that's
And Joe's
the hard
plan
part with
is about
Bernie. Like I
saying
know
we're gonna
Bernie is
deal with
in.
it, but we're also going to create jobs.
You and I, we both
Donald
advocated for
Trump,
Bernie
when
left,
asked
all
about
over the
wildfires
place.
in California,
Mm-hmm.
and the question was, you know, the science
And
is
maybe
telling us this,
maybe
you know
there
what
was
Donald
too
Trump
much
said?
stacked up against him
Science
this
doesn't
year,
know.
but
Yeah.
I you know, he
Let's
wasn't
talk about who is
necessarily like
prepared to
Trump in
lead
that
our
sense.
country
Like he
over the
did cut
course
through
of
a
the
lot of
next 4
bullshit, but
years on
he
what
was
is an
also very
existential
willing
threat to us
to
as human
cooperate
beings.
with
Joe
Biden,
is about saying we're gonna
to
invest that in
call
renewable
him my
energy. It's gonna
friend,
be about the
and
creation of
to
millions of
Yeah,
jobs.
aggressive.
To
and-
achieve
Mm-hmm.
net,
I
zero
wanted the
emissions by
Brooklyn Bernie.
2050,
You know, I wanted
carbon
like
neutral by
Yeah.
pissed off
2035.
Bernie who's
Joe
like,
has a
even if
plan.
Biden is his
This
friend,
has
he's
been
not
on
going
top
to
for the
tolerate
Trump
Biden's
administration,
bullshit.
and
You
really
know,
has been to go
So-
back
Yeah.
instead of forward.
Yeah.
We've
I
also
remember
entered the
distinctly
climate agreement with pride.
hurting and
Senator Harris
cringing
just
when
said
Bernie
that
gave
climate
those
change
sorts
is
of
an
answers
existential
to those
threat.
questions.
Vice President Pence,
Because
do you
it was
believe climate
just
change poses
so-
an existential threat.
Yeah, so over the top, like
As I said,
unnecessary,
Susan,
gratuitous.
The climate is changing. We'll follow the science.
Not the right time to call Joe Biden a friend.
Once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of 4 across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say
She was a
second
co-sponsor,
recently
actually.
America
That's
to the
true.
Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue
Yeah,
to
back
cherish it.
when,
We've made great progress.
everyone was having to in the Democratic primaries push left as much as possible before everyone consolidated around Biden. Everyone was like, "Oh, universal health care, sure, I believe in that."
American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million.
Yeah, it's sad for me because all they would have to do is like articulate the correct position, like say this is why universal health care works and is necessary, you know, just stand up for it, and then the momentum will come.
Yeah, and I think we clearly saw that during Bernie's campaign with successes, with even Mackey over the summer and his win. You know, he was just advocating for the right thing to do right now, based on the science, based on research with the policies and the populist support.
Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential
the Green New Deal,
and the American
of course,
people know
goes
what I'm
back
talking
to 2009. The UN had a Green New Deal.
You know, we have a
And it was just, you know, a proposal. There was, without the U.S., there's no weight behind these kinds of things. But there should be a global Green New Deal and, you know, nationalized Green New Deals in different countries.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an internationalist movement.
This is where the economy is in America
in some form
right
or
now,
another.
and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond.
The scary thing with respect to this particular question, too, is feeling that we don't have the time. You know, like in history, you're always trying to, you know, push for progress as soon as possible. Like, let's get women the right to vote. Let's get different minorities more rights. Let's have equality. And you're always trying to push that as fast as possible. But the thing with the environment and climate change is we don't have the time to waffle and disagree and fuck around. We need to like build a consensus around it and start acting in that way as soon as possible.
Yeah, we're already too late in the sense of avoiding most of the expected changes, right, in terms of the climate collapse, environmental shifts and everything. We're already in the middle of it. But yeah, there's no time. There's no time to gradually trickle into a progressive agenda with climate crisis and everything else. But I feel like that's
So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
I mean, that's the essential like fatal flaw of centrism, which is like people aren't ready for this yet. You have to introduce it slowly. You know, we're making a ton of money, but we're also decent human beings, so we'll sort of like make capitalism a little less evil and maybe make it a little nicer as the decades go on. Like there's no time. There's no time for that. Whether it's like in the human world with like revolution, social disruption, and everything else, or in the environmental, in the biosphere, where it's just going to be collapse, right? Like that's just not how systems work. You can't just push a thing and expect it to just adhere to your behavior until you're ready to change, right? So
we saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to
10 members of the Senate to vote against
to believe it too, because in the 21st century, you know, notwithstanding the pandemic, which has kind of locked down travel, but we have so much capacity for mobility, right? So if there's, you know, obviously poor people like in a hurricane path are screwed, but the rich elites, they don't think about these things because they don't live in those areas, or they can just leave, you know. A lot of these catastrophic events will be kind of localized, but then there's the bigger picture stuff, you know, global food security, ocean acidity, and fish stocks and
China is
air
the
pollution. You know, there's global consequences.
And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear. Made it clear again today.
Yeah, that's the problem.
China
Like,
and the World Health Organization did not place
just
fear
having
into the
like
American
a
people.
sense that this is a
They did not let our
multi-systemic
personnel into China
event that's
to get
distributed
information on the
locally
coronavirus until the
over
middle of
particular
February. Fortunately,
uniquely
President
disturbing
Trump,
or disruptive
in
weather
dealing with China
patterns
from the
or
outset of this
environmental
administration,
issues,
standing
let's say
up
like
to
a
China,
die-off
they've been
of a
taking
certain
advantage of America for decades.
fish or
In the wake of
particularly
Joe
unusually
Biden's
hot
cheerleading for
hurricane
China.
season, more
President
frequency
Trump
or
made that
intensity of
decision before
hurricanes,
the end
all
of
of these
January to
things, like
suspend all
if you
travel from China.
divide and conquer and
And
not
again,
really see
the
it as a
American people
gestalt or as a
deserve to know
whole,
Joe Biden
it's very easy to
opposed
sort of
President Trump's
dismiss them as
decision
they
to
go
suspend
along
all
and say
travel
like, well,
from
this is
China.
just an
He
exception
said it was
this year, right?
hysterical. He said it was
Thank you,
xenophobic.
President Pence.
But President Trump
The
has
fires in
said about the
California
time
are
we're gonna
really just a
continue to stand
forestry
strong.
management
Thank you,
We wanna
problem. It's
improve
not
the
about
relationship,
climate
but we're
change,
gonna level the
right?
playing field and
Yeah.
Like there's a very like willingness, like unwillingness, or perhaps willingness
Thank
in the
you.
sense of like
Senator Harris, let me
a
ask
will
you the same
to
question that I
not
asked
connect the
Vice President.
dots, to
How would
see
you
things
describe
in
our
isolation.
fundamental relationship
And
with
I
China?
really don't
Are
know
we
how to counter that
competitors,
because I feel like more
adversaries,
than the actual
enemies?
policies,
You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
more than the science itself, it's
Susan,
this kind
the
of will to
Trump
disconnecting the facts,
administration's
which is like our
perspective and
greatest
approach to China has resulted
obstacle
in the
right
loss
now to
of
actually getting
American
anything done,
lives,
you know, as a social
American
imaginary or
jobs,
whatever we would call it.
and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden.
It's a weird tick.
It's
For
true.
example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got away, they got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of
No.
It is true.
It
Of course.
it was
that
literally
Pence-
dismantled.
President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking
his head.
at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of
All
that
right,
failed
let's keep playing this. I will be right
war
back.
that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global
Did I miss anything
leadership
exciting?
over the past 4 years.
No.
And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said.
Does she really?
He said, you know,
You have to wonder, like, what the interpersonal relations behind the scenes are like.
And so we know this in our
Exciting
personal and
times.
professional relationships.
Exciting conversation.
You
Joe
gotta
rolls
be
up
loyal
on
to
his
your
in his
friends.
convertible.
Gotta be loyal to your friends.
Practice
People who
safe
stood with
distance.
you, gotta stand with them.
Talk about the Green New Deal.
You gotta know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and
got a lot of
embraced dictators
chatting
around the
in the,
world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So
The YouTube here.
Russia, I serve
YouTube
on the
stream?
Intelligence Committee
Yeah.
of the United States Senate.
I'll have my setup better next time so I can
America's
actually
intelligence community
track it.
told
But
us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in
got Ryan in
2016
there, we
and
got
is planning
Coda.
in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director
Yeah, there's a chat in this thing too, like for comments, but there's nothing in it.
Yeah, I'm wondering about
Ecam
that.
thing.
I'm wondering about that because it should be working, but I'm streaming technically through like a multi-streamer, which hits everything.
I
So I'm
see.
wondering if it
I
just
see.
doesn't pick up.
Yeah.
Which now has put us in a position.
So hi everybody.
where we are less safe
Thanks
because
for
they are
tuning in with
building
us.
up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy.
Yeah, Ryan was saying,
coupled
yikes,
with
way to
his
lose the progressive
isolationism,
vote. That's right.
He pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that
I've
has
seen,
always been part of the
on
strength of our
Facebook,
nation,
progressive
in
people,
addition to our
friends,
great military,
mutual
has been
friends
that
of
we keep
ours,
our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that.
asking
'Cause
who
he
to vote
doesn't
for,
understand
being
what it means
uncertain,
to
being
be
on the
honest.
fence. And I find myself
Thank you,
stepping in and
thank
say,
you,
well, you
Senator
got to vote
Harris.
for Biden.
Vice
Obviously, he
President, somebody give you a chance to
sucks.
respond.
But the line of like Chomsky and Chapo and
the
the left broadly is vote for him and protest on day one. Like do the job of an active citizen, of advocating for the right progress forward. And given the choices through Biden is the only path. Given because Bernie endorsed him too, right? That complicates things. I wish Bernie did in both years did a third party run just as an experiment, right? Because given how things went, like what have you got to lose, right?
Yeah.
So that's my radical take is, do the third party thing. But this election, obviously, that's not going to have an effect at all. So vote for Biden, and then what there is of a tenuous left coalition can organize during a Biden presidency and can not infiltrate, but try to work with them and try to rally, down ballot candidates and try to, have a kind of presidential contender on the left by 2024.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad strategy. I think, obviously, like the argument should be. I've heard this too. Essentially, what you're saying. Vote for Biden. He's the enemy we want in the White House. Like, yes, we have to resist and fight and strategize and vote out in the down ballot and push for our policies to get traction. But we're not going to get any traction at all if Trump's in the White House. So it's really a strategic vote. It's an ethical vote, and if you're in a swing state, I think arguably you ought to just vote Biden and then worry about the rest once he's in.
President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to
Vice
do harm
President
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America
Thank you, Vice President.
is safer. Our allies are safer. And the
Say it one
American
more
people
time.
know President Donald Trump will never have.
Thank you, Vice President.
There we go.
I
Very
would like to
good.
give Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them?
because of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war.
This is a controversial opinion, but I actually think a lot of the time that Trump is, in his own way, smart. You know, because he's thrived for so long as a type of criminal.
American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is?
And you know, when he talks to the media and to the public, of course, like Bush, he has his idiosyncrasies that make him sound dumb and incoherent, but he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Joe Biden would never do
And
that.
there's a way to interpret it that it makes sense, right? There's always different ways to interpret these things based on what word you think he said and so on. So I give him credit, but obviously
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is
many so-called smart people are stupid in other ways or dangerous in various ways. And so Trump fits that complex bill.
Well, I got to have more than that. Look,
I mean,
I'm sorry, but Vice President, but you've had more time.
he's
than she's
basically
had
the
so far.
the chaos president.
Donald Trump
Speaking of spiral dynamics and integral theory, like
are absurd.
Trump is
I'm
the
sorry,
spiral
Vice
wizard.
President.
He's whatever works. He's whatever works.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he could
I can assure all
pretend
of
to
you,
come from the left
the
and be a
sons and daughters
populist
serving
for a
in our
minute, and then he
military.
could go back to the
President
right
Donald
and
Trump
just
not only
be
respects, but
totally, you know,
reveres all
conservative
of
and those who serve in our armed forces, and xenophobic,
any suggestion otherwise
reactionary if he
ridiculous.
wants to be. Then he can move back to the left.
Vice President Pence. Vice President
He
Pence.
doesn't have any substance. He's like the thing.
Vice President Pence, I did
So
Yeah, but it takes a certain degree of intelligence and coherence from moment to moment to sustain that action. Like a lot of great commentators think that Trump is just failing upward, you know, continuously stumbling into victories and success, and that might be true to a little bit of an extent, but all the people he chooses to surround himself with and the business ventures he pursues, whether they're a scam or whether they're something like, you know, The Apprentice, which is like, it's not a scam in the typical sense, but it's a TV show, right? So you're trying to, like, you know, scam the audience to get ad revenue. So, you know, but he did it, you know, he executed that plan, that show, you know, he takes the time to show up in these different places, like the, you know, WWE, for example. And so, you know, he's got a coherent strategic intelligence, just like Bush did, that allows these people to survive and thrive despite having this reputation of being dumb.
I mean, I don't think he would have. Maybe that is like part of his own brilliance in being such a successful long-term media personality, is that, like, he understands media, he understands the memetics that are involved and the certain, like, roles and sort of demographic values that are flexing and flowing through that media space. He just has that kind of intelligence. And if we go into astrology, he's a Gemini, so I mean, like, he's got that mercurial archetypal flowing between different perspectives. He's very good at that, and he's like, he's got the hands, he's got the little hands.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the value of profit, you know, in capitalism, of just making money, whatever it may be, like Trump's stakes, Trump University, you know, his sort of art of the deal type books.
Yeah.
You know, he sees anything that's a financial opportunity as not necessarily inherently good, but it's legal. You know,
Right.
it's totally legal. It's totally above board. It's making people happy. And it's also, you know, scamming them in different cases. But that's how. So it speaks to the sickness and depravity that we're all sort of subject to, in just like wanting to get rich, wanting to seek financial gain, whatever it may, in whatever form that may take, right?
Thank you.
And for Trump, it's just, there's obviously no criticism of that. There's no moral reservation about, Trump Steaks or Trump University. It's like, hey, here's a business opportunity to exploit. And I think that's a evil kind of subtext or meta narrative behind all of our activity in society. Like anybody who has those sort of entrepreneurial aspirations
Joe Biden and I are both people of faith.
Are contributing to the same kind of capitalist,
knock anyone for their faith. And
just
fact,
death
Joe,
spiral,
if
just
elected, will be only the
extractive
practicing Catholic,
way of life.
as president of the United States.
Absolutely, yeah. That's like capitalist realism
of this
incarnate.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is that it's tempting. It's tempting for all of us. And Trump just, it's this whole lifestyle brand, right?
Yeah.
And, before, when this conversation has come up, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted.
For a year and a half now.
Right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus.
The
Donald
fact
Trump is in court right now trying
that
to get rid of the Affordable CareCt. And I said
there
it before,
is,
and it bears repeating.
high-level judges,
This
Supreme Court
means
nominees,
that
and
there will be
high-level
no more
Republicans
protections if they win for people with pre-existing
that
conditions.
take the
This means
opposite
that
view
over 20 million
on things like
people will lose
abortion,
your
as if these things aren't sort of
It means that if
historically
you're under
settled.
the age of 26, you can't stay on
Speaks
your
to the
parents'
depth of the
coverage
meta
anymore.
crisis.
And here's the thing.
These are people who have invested
Contrast
lots
couldn't
of
be
their
more clear.
careers and
They're trying to get rid of
lifestyles
the Affordable
in
Care Act.
arguing
Saying,
for a
let's expand
political
coverage, let's give you a
position
choice of a
that
public
doesn't
option or
actually
private
hold
coverage.
up
Let's bring
intellectually
down
and
premiums
epistemically
for
and
let's lower
in terms of
Medicare
its social
eligibility to
consequences.
60.
They're advocating a policy that hurts people.
You mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing
I mean, it's
conditions.
literally like a breakdown of a shared world, right? Like,
you are supporting, your administration supporting,
in
that would strike
maybe
down
more normal
the Affordable
circumstances,
Care
we'd
Act.
all
The
be
president
acting
says- President Trump
towards
says that he's
the
gonna protect
benefit
people
of
with pre-existing conditions, but he has not
having a
explained
shared
how
world that
he
we're
would do
concerned
that.
about,
that
and
was one
that
of
we
the
may have
toughest nuts
differences
to
about
crack
how to
when
enact
they
a
were
better
passing
world,
the Affordable
but it's
Care
never
Act.
been
So
this
tell
terrible
us
where it's just like,
specifically, how would
I
your
don't live in the
administration
reality you do.
protect
Climate change does
American
not exist for
people
me.
with
I'm not going to vote
access
that
to
way. You
affordable
guys are
insurance
just like
if the
climate
Affordable
alarmists,
Care
and
Act is struck
oil's
down?
great, fracking's great,
Thank you,
It's
Susan,
just
but
like,
let me just
yeah,
say,
there's one thing to
addressing
like
your very first
spin
question.
political policy in
I
favor of
couldn't
your
be
own
more
ideology
proud to serve as
and
Vice
convince yourself
President
what
to a
you're
president
doing
who
is
stands
for the
without
good. Like that has
apology
always
for the
probably
sanctity of
existed in
human
modern
life.
politics, but like
I'm pro-life.
it's just reached such an
I don't
extreme level.
apologize for it.
It's
And
it's
this
kind of
is
a
another
farce
one of
now.
those
If it wasn't a
cases where there's
tragedy
such a
already.
dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth.
Oh boy.
Late-term abortion. They want to increase
The abortion
funding to
issue.
Planned Parenthood.
That
of
is an
America.
issue. I mean, I've
Now,
had
for
some
our part, I
conversations
would
with
never
other
presume how
leftists
Judge
about
Amy
this,
Coney
and
Barrett
you know,
will
like
rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but
it's such a
continue
good,
to stand
it's such a
strong for the right to
brilliant
life.
way to
when you
keep
speak
that
about
voting
the
block
Supreme Court, though, I think
voting
the American people
right.
really deserve an answer,
It's like a
Senator
single issue kind of vote
Are you
where
and
it's
Joe
just
Biden
like
gonna pack the
they've
court
really weaponized
if
it
Judge
so
Amy Coney
well.
Barrett is confirmed?
I wish we could. I wish the left could weaponize, or maybe I won't say it that way, but you know, like to that degree of like, you know, the planet is important. Oil destroys, you know, fossil fuel emissions, etc., are deeply destructive. Like we'll never vote this way because of this factor. They've just so successfully used religion, you know, and the left hasn't, which has been one of the issues I know a lot of folks like Michael Brooks has been talking about. But yeah, it's a tricky issue.
Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that.
I love her reactions; they're great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked that.
She really, like, what's the word, kind of babies him or infantilizes him, like, it's my turn to talk. It's like,
was up for re-election.
you know, I'm not necessarily a fan of Kamala, but you know, it's good optics.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I am
a
too.
seat became open on the United States Supreme
Good
Court.
optics.
Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House but the
And
Senate.
it is a contrast
But
from
honest
Trump
Abe
and Biden, where they just
said
talked over each
It's
other.
not the right thing to do.
And
The
you know,
American people
here Pence is
deserve to
shaking
make
his
the
head, and
decision
then
who will
he's
be the next
he's lying
president of
about
the
something,
United
and then
States.
Kamala
And
is
then
like
that
smiling
person
and
can
you know,
select
just
who will
like
serve
getting
for a
poised
lifetime
to
on the
trounce
highest
on him
court
and say,
of
"It's
our
my turn to
land.
talk. You had
And
your
so Joe
chance."
and I are
Just
very
like
clear. The American
they're doing good
people
to
are
kind of silence
voting
each other.
right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
Crystal Ball says he's kind of. These people kind of remind me why some gravitated to Trump. In fairness, normal politicians are kind of insufferable.
Let's talk
This is another kind of hell realm to go through. The last debate was something else, but this is
and if you haven't figured it out
not
yet,
so
the
great.
straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Somehow win
I
this
just
election.
opened Twitter. I should have it open too, because it's always a great source of commentary as it's happening. The first thing that pops up here is Andres Bernal, our friend. Does Mike Pence have a soul? Good question.
I don't know. You peer
That's
in
from
there,
like
and
about packing the court then.
46 minutes
Let's
ago.
talk about the pack. Yeah, I'm about to.
oh, what?
So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People
some,
who are purely ideological.
Crystal Ball's
people who
retweeting
have
that
been
comment
reviewed
about a
by-
reputable Wall
by
Street
legal
firm.
professional organizations and found not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime
You do a super
appointments,
cut of
not one
people
is black?
shaking their heads, like
This is what
Pence and
they
Kamala
do.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
shaking their
Talk about
heads.
packing the court. Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you,
You should
Senator.
all be
Let's
this
go on and
reaction
talk about
GIFs
the
on
issue
Twitch.
of
Just-
racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So I think
Thank
maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
Thank you,
But I think
thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so, and I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer,
All right, we're getting
and
into
her
this
family.
now.
and her family
more
deserves
contemporary.
justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street, so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed
under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race.
At least she can sort of convincingly express a sense of disgust
Strangers to each other.
over this kind of stuff, like, because it is disgusting.
Fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will
just ban the
require a
chokehold.
national registry.
So stupid. It's so superficial, and I've read that it's already been done in most places or across the board. Like, it's just a stupid answer. They need to end the war on drugs.
Yep.
Oh, she just said decriminalize marijuana, but Biden has said no to that.
On a tragic issue
Senator Harris,
of
your time
unarmed
is up.
black people in America.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
But that's key. You have to decriminalize marijuana. You have to end the war on drugs.
Was justice
Key.
done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. Justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption.
Bully into legends is like, will Pence answer a single question tonight?
that America is systemically
And who is ISIS again? I don't recall.
And that, as Joe Biden said,
yeah, no, I don't understand why they were talking about that before.
Implicit bias against minorities is a great insult.
They should touch on the thing that happened in the last debate, which is Trump mentioning critical race theory, saying it should be, banned. Something that's exactly what Jim Rutt did, by the way, 6 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Banned?
I mean, his words, like from the Facebook group, he wanted to ban any invocation, any discussion of anything, authors, terms, anything from critical race theory. Just ban it, right?
That fly.
And then
there's a fly on Pence's scalp.
Thank you, Vice
Oh, that's perfect.
Oh, screen cap that.
It's just hanging out.
To
It's just there.
It's tasty there, I guess.
Record investments in education and
It's
fight for school choice for all of our members.
Thank you, Vice President.
That's perfect.
Perfect. This is perfect.
Just making a home.
Needs to be said. Yeah.
Vice President, on what it means to enforce
Looks
the
like a
laws of our
comfy
country.
place for
I
a
am the only
fly.
one on this stage who was personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the
fly
big
won the
banks
debate.
for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this
Do
stage
a little Twitter poll. Who won the debate?
the
It's still there.
It's
It's like, how long is it going to be there
We are
for?
talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused
like
to condemn
vultures
white
circling.
supremacists. And
Not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he
Oh
said,
man,
"No trust."
I can just imagine people losing their minds
Stand by.
Yeah.
right now about that fly.
And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed.
I mean, I don't see it anymore.
There were neo-Nazis.
It's
BJ
gone now.
Prashad is
Yeah.
saying a fly sat on Pence's head and died. I don't know if it died. I can't confirm.
Anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the president of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris.
And recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we all have so much more in
What
common
she's
than
saying
differences.
exactly
President,
speaks to what I just said, like about the denunciation of critical race theory. You know, like we don't have a normal discourse to talk about these things. So Trump can say, "Oh yeah, there's a problem on both sides," and then he, you know, a couple of years later, yeah, critical race theory is the problem. They're the real racists.
I mean, it's the same thing that like Jordan Peterson and all his ilk were talking about, right? Like it's really the leftists that are the dangerous fascists.
Yeah, it's reached its pinnacle in Trump saying whatever his exact words were, but
Yeah.
calling out critical race theory.
I'm hoping that's the high watermark and it doesn't get worse. But it's really interesting, and I feel like for another discussion, but to like really unpack that and try to understand like what goes into
I'm glad you brought up your records.
that
Thank
thinking.
you.
It's almost
That's-
like
I
in
really
terms
need
of
to
like
make this
flat Earth
point.
thinking or
When you were-
QAnon.
when
It's
you
like
were
there's a
governor
whole reorganization of reality that
when you left office,
makes it so that
African
people
Americans were
earnestly
19
believe
times
critical
more
race
likely
theory
be
is trying
prosecuted for
to
minor drug offenses
take
than
over
whites and
the world
Hispanics.
or
Yeah.
take over into a
Yeah.
fascist dictatorship or something.
That's a meta discussion I want to have, and it's difficult because it really requires the participation of our opponents to some degree, you know. And I'm going to talk to Jim in a couple weeks, and that's obviously going to be a thing that's going to come up.
Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We fought for
Pence.
educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you,
members.
sir.
And we'll do it for 4
Thank you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election
But
itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of
I
time.
appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator.
I would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the
Just a lost cause.
We have to-
She starts with the ban on chokeholds and like goes going into a monologue that there's no time for.
I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate
That is a good
requirement that there
thing.
would be a training for law
I
enforcement
totally
on implicit
support
bias because, yes,
body
Joe Biden
cams
and I
and them being on all the
recognize
time,
that
and
implicit
you know
bias
that's
does
when this
exist, Mr.
footage
Vice
gets out,
President,
it
contrary to what you may
really
believe.
affects how people
We did
think.
the work
sure.
of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe.
I think
and
the
a
fly
commitment
said
to
it all.
reforming
I think
criminal
the fly
justice
said it
system.
all. Like
Yeah.
the inverse of Bernie and the bird that landed on his
First,
podium.
Right,
It's just
that's
like,
a good analogy.
this is the other polarity of that.
President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept
I wonder if
peaceful transfer of power,
a fly could
what
transmit
steps would you
COVID.
and
You know, if
Vice
it lands on
President Biden then
one
take? What
person
would
and then
happen
takes it to another
next?
person.
You have 2 minutes.
Maybe.
So
I mean,
I'll
that
tell you,
plexiglass is not
Joe
doing
and I
anything for
are,
either of them.
really,
So
The plexiglass
proud
is not
of
stopping the fly.
the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know.
my wife said
that Joe Biden
the fact everyone is sitting
has
down
a
in chairs
deep,
is probably not
deep-seated
helping the
commitment
sleepy vibe
to
of this
fight
debate.
for our democracy.
It's true. It's true.
And to
Everyone's
fight
just
for
kind
the
of like,
integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so
We've sure
we
come a
believe
long
in
way
American
from
We believe in our
the primary
democracy.
debates
And
where
here's what
there,
I'd like
you
to
know,
say
there's
to everybody.
literally packed
Vote.
audiences. They're
Please
cheering for
vote,
this or
vote
that.
early.
You know,
Come up
it's
with a
like there's
plan
so
to
much
vote. Go to
energy.
iwillvote.com. You can also go to
we're just
to
stuck
joebiden.com.
online.
We have it within
It's
our
one thing to
power
be
in
like
these next
a
27
stream video
to
about
make
this,
the
but it's another
decision
just like
about what will be
there's nobody in that
the course
audience
of
with these
our
people.
country for the next 4 years. And
Probably.
it is
I
within
mean,
our power, and if
handful,
we use
but
our vote and we use our voice,
nowhere near the kind of
we
energy
will win.
that would
And we will
be
not
if
let
this was
anyone
like
subvert our
if there was no
democracy
pandemic right
with
now.
what Donald
You know,
Trump has been
these would
doing,
be
as he
there'd be
did on the
arguments
stage
about
last
like who
week,
packed the
when
seats,
again in
right?
front of
Like
70
who
million
funded the
people,
tickets. Remember that? There was like a thing during the primary
openly
with Bernie.
Yeah.
And, like,
attempted to
everyone was
suppress
booing Bernie
the
for one
vote.
of those primary debates.
Right.
Joe Biden, on the other hand, on
Right.
that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record.
It's
because
so
he's a
funny.
president.
Just looking at my
Joe
Twitter
Biden,
feed,
on
you
the
know,
other
I
hand, said,
haven't
hey,
I haven't
just
selected
please vote.
a
So I'll
hashtag
repeat
or
what Joe
anything. This
said.
is just my
Please
feed,
vote.
and it's like
Thank you,
90%
Senator. Vice President Pence,
about the
President
fly
Trump has
on
several
Pence's
times
head.
refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of
seeing
power
that too.
after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as Vice President? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military. We revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting
What does
for
that mean,
fair trade,
rebuild the military? The military is
we appointed
bloated.
consultants to our federal courts at every level.
We're gonna
What does
And
that
we
mean,
stood with the
rebuild
men
it?
and women of law
We're gonna
enforcement in
rebloat
this
the
day. And
military.
I think that movement of Americans is only
It's
grown
losing a little
stronger
bit of
in the last
bloat on the
4
left
years.
side, so we are gonna
Talk about
re-bloat
accepting the
that
outcome
side.
of the election. I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It's
Mike
amazing. When Joe
Urick
Biden was
said,
Vice President of the United States,
retweeted Ben Jealous,
the
saying, "Let
FBI
me say
actually spied
that
on
Pence's fly is the
President Trump
karma
in my
opposite of
campaign.
Bernie's bird."
I mean, there were documents
There you
released
go.
this week that the
You called
CIA
it.
actually made
Exactly.
a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all
Our audio's
seen
too
the
low, but
avalanche
no,
that-
McKee was like, "Did a
that you
dog
put
just
the
bark in the
country through
background?"
for
I
the
missed
better part
that. I didn't
of
hear anything.
3 years.
Oh,
until it was
really?
found there was no
In the
obstruction, no
debate, you mean?
collusion, case
Yeah, I
closed.
mean, maybe somebody will
And
clip
then
that,
Senator
but
Harris, you and your
I don't
colleagues
know.
in the Congress
we got like
tried to
hellhounds,
impeach the
we got
President of the United
flies.
States over a phone call.
It's not
And now
going
Hillary
well.
Clinton has actually
Signs
said to Joe
importance,
Biden
right?
in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in
The whole American voting system is so messed up, you know. And I think all countries' voting systems are kind of, you know, overly complicated.
Someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to
Yeah.
write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close
I haven't
tonight's
even been
debate with
tracking,
the
like-
question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an
I don't know
8th
what this question
grader
is.
at Springville Junior High.
Voter
in Springville,
participation
Utah.
over the
And here's
past
what
4
she wrote,
years,
quote,
like, did it uptick
"When I
during
watch the
2016?
news, all I see
Will
is
we see a
arguing between
trend
Democrats
between
and
2016
Republicans.
and
When
Yeah.
I watch the
I don't
news,
think it
all I
upticked. I
see
think
is citizen
turnout was
fighting
lower
against
than
citizen.
the
When I watch
previous
the news, all I
times.
see are two candidates from opposing parties.
But it just seems so
trying to tear
hard
each
to
other
vote.
down.
Like I think
If our
mail-in
leaders
ballots is
can't
a
get
great
along,
idea.
how
Yeah.
are the
Like to
citizens supposed to
avoid
get along?
vote
And then she
fraud
added,
and to avoid voter
"Your
suppression.
examples could make all the difference
I agree with you.
to bring us together."
My wife and
end
I are
quote.
doing that.
So to each of you in turn,
And,
I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond.
It eases the
to
load, and then it
Brecklin.
also,
Vice
like,
President Pence, you have 1
just seems
minute.
like a safer way
Brecklin, it's a
to
wonderful
manage it.
question.
Yeah, and I know Australia has
just commend you for
mandatory
taking an
voting,
interest
right?
in-
But
in
that
public
you can
life.
pick nobody, right? And so
I
that
started,
ensures that everybody
following the news when I was
votes,
very young.
everybody does
And
the
we,
process,
we believe
and
in
you
free
have
and
better
open exchange
results.
of
You have
debate.
more efficient democracy.
And we
Not
celebrate
that Australia is a model
how
of
we
democracy,
created
right?
liberty,
They're
the
captured
freest and
by
most prosperous
neoliberalism too.
in the history of
But
the
I like
world.
the idea of mandatory voting if it's
I would
easy
tell
to
you,
do, and it still enables you
assume
to,
what you're
you know,
seeing,
vote for nobody
in your local
if you're not satisfied with the
news
choices.
networks
Yeah.
is synonymous with the
I,
American
that's
people.
an
You know, I
interesting
look at the
idea. I don't know. I
relationship
think
between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
might work
the
out here.
late justice
I'm
who
sure
just
people would
lost
hate
from
that, especially the
Supreme Court,
libertarians, but
and the late Justice Antonin Scalia.
I wouldn't have any complaints.
They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the
I
United
mean, hell, the
States.
census
One
like
very liberal, one very
like
conservative.
traces you down
But what's
if
been
you don't
learned
like
since her
respond to
passing
it.
was that
Yeah.
two of them and their
So.
families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of need. And we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Thank you, Mr. Vice
Senator
President.
Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I
Brecklin.
know our future is bright.
Nomiki says the most Zoomer
it
name
is that
ever.
perspective on who we are and who we should be.
Yeah, fair enough.
That is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him, like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way.
It's true.
And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
Brecklin,
Thank you, Vice
2049.
President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also.
I don't remember who
University
said
of
it,
Utah for
but
its
some
hospitality.
leftist said
And
that,
most of all,
you
our
know,
thanks to all the
Biden
Americans who
platform
watched
or
this
whatever
debate tonight.
is
Again, our best
still
wishes
one
for
of
a
the
quick
most
recovery to
progressive
President
in American
Trump,
history.
the First Lady,
Right? Like
and
obviously
everyone
it's not
who is
up
battling
to our
COVID-19.
standards,
The
but
second presidential debate is next week.
you know, got to move it in that
A
direction.
town hall style debate in Miami.
I mean,
we hope you'll join us then.
Technically,
Good evening.
sure. I mean,
And
I
that
think
is the end of
that's
the vice presidential debate right there.
that's the kind of thing
What a
that we have to
difference
keep
a
in
week
mind
makes.
for this, right?
Two
Like,
very different personalities on the stage tonight.
because
They showed
of
their
the
personalities throughout the
initiatives
debate,
of Bernie
both by what
and the
they
Bernie
said and
campaign
didn't
and the
say,
progressive
how they
populist
reacted
movement,
when their opponent was
Biden
talking.
had to put together,
Both candidates slightly
technically
more
speaking, the
effective
most progressive
in attacking their opponents than
campaign
defending the records
in
of their principles.
history, and just in terms of the
Some
United
informed
States. And
questions from the moderator, Susan
that's
Page,
that's a
but
minor
they're-
victory, I would say. I mean, it is nowhere
candidates
near
were
what
in
we
the
want,
order
but it's like,
when they were answering the question, didn't answer those
again,
questions
this is like a
at
strategic
all. Kamala Harris
decision to vote for
scoring on the
Biden to be able to work with
coronavirus,
that. How do we
healthcare,
leverage
and
that?
Russia. Mike Pence trying to steer things back to the
Or do we give
economy
up?
and
I mean, like, I think it
taxes.
really comes down
And
to that.
David,
Like,
you're here, you
do
said
we
at the
leverage that
beginning, coronavirus
and
front and
try
center.
to
It was.
push
Yeah, it is
the
backdrop of
Biden
what we're
administration
going through in this
further
country,
left
and
and
the
make
President
inroads
Trudeau's
with the
looking at
down
all
ballot
these issues,
as
and as you said,
rapidly
George,
as
for
possible?
the millions of
Or
Americans who wondered what last week
do
was,
we
where was the
allow
debate? They got a
a
debate
Trump
tonight. There
administration
was a
to
stark
dismantle
contrast,
any
I should
possibility
say,
of
on
leveraging,
taxes, climate change, Supreme Court, but
you
as
know,
you
the
mentioned,
presidency
pandemic
for
right out of
some
the
kind
gate,
of
and you heard
viable
Senator Harris say the
pathway
American
to
people
a
have
more
witnessed what is the
progressive
greatest failure of any
Congress
presidential
and Senate,
administration
and obviously
in
all the other things that
history
we're
of
trying
our
to fight for.
country.
But
That was her first line out of the gate tonight. She talked about the 210,000
Yeah.
lives. She talked about the audio of the
I'm
president
always
acknowledging that he knew that
perplexed
this was
by
lethal,
Obama,
airborne,
you know,
which
because
we've been reporting on
he's
just
so
in recent
accessible
days. The CDC
sometimes. Like I
guidance
remember
in the US
I
did not
I listened to
the American
him.
people
I
not
listened
hear
to
this
him
from
go
the
on
Pence
Mark Maron's
administration
podcast once.
far earlier than the
You know,
March
and that's
date
like
that
in
you
Mark
cited.
Maron's
You heard what the vice
garage, you know,
president said in
like, and this
response,
is
and
like
we
during when he was
knew this would
president,
happen
and
going
it's
into this
like
debate. He has defended
it's
President
just
Trump. He's
so
been very effective in his role
confusing
as vice president in that way. He said President
that
Trump
Obama
put America
is
first. He talked
this
about
like
suspending
personable,
travel
accessible
from China, and
person.
mentioned what
He'll
Joe Biden has said
he
about
you
that.
know he'll let
In
you
the past,
in
he
those
pivoted
sorts of cases
to
let
the
you
future
ask
on
him any
vaccines,
question and he'll
the
just
question
roll
then
with
back to
it.
Senator Harris, will you take the
But
vaccine if there is
he's
one
not
by
a friend
law?
of
She
the
said
left,
doctors,
clearly,
Dr.
like the
Fauci and the other doctors
really
say,
cutting
"Take it,
edge
I'll be first in line."
socialist
She said, if Donald Trump
movement.
tells me to take that
You
vaccine,
know, you don't see a lot of
I will not take
engagement
it.
there.
well, like
Lindsey
who
Davies said
was
at the
saying
start,
this
which
recently? It was
Kamala
something
Harris
I don't
will
think I
get the
retweeted it, but
prosecutor or not?
it
Did we
was
get it?
someone comparing
Not as much
Obama
as I thought.
to
I mean, I
Luke
think it was part
Skywalker in
prosecutor,
the sense
part
that like
fact check, part presidential
he's a
interview.
kind of a
At the same time,
Jedi
she
because he
allowed,
seems like
Vice President Pence
he's
to be
a
rather
friend of
evasive
the
and
people,
not
right? He's
necessarily
able to
answer the
talk in that
questions
way.
as he
He
was
goes
asked
to
at
Mark
one point.
Maron's
He was asked
garage
about
and that kind of
healthcare, he
thing,
answered
but
about
like
the Supreme Court. He was asked about
he's able to
China, he
like
answered,
talk about that in a way
NAFTA,
where
and
like
yet
he's
it was
actually
Pence who
dismantling
actually really
substantive
held her feet to the
progressive
fire. At one
policies
point he
and
said, "I
arguing
just
for
want the
why
record
that's
to
like
reflect she
not
never
really
answered
the
question." He
right
was
thing to
referring, of
do
course,
and
to
making
the
it
Supreme
sound
Court.
genuine.
One thing I thought
That's
was
the scary
interesting,
thing.
in
He's making the
2016, there was an
neoliberal
analyst who said that
position
the VP
for a
debate
lot
at
of
that
these
time, the
policies
matchup was like
sound like it's a
Miracle Whip
very
versus
human-centric
mayonnaise.
thing.
I think
That's
that
the
was
example he
what
was
we
using. He was
got
talking
all
about,
tonight. I think that Kamala Harris was rather
well, you know,
spicy.
if we get
Fortunately,
universal
this was
health
more
care,
about
think
policy
about the
than it was
thousands
personality.
No
of
question, they covered a
private
lot more
insurance
policy
healthcare
ground. Karen did
workers
not necessarily get
who
all
are
those
going to be
questions
losing their
answered
jobs,
over the
who
course
help
of the 90
administer
minutes, but many
healthcare
more
as it is right
questions
now.
were
Like, I'm
addressed. And
thinking
before
about
we get to
those
more on that,
jobs.
I
I'm
do
thinking
wanna
about
bring
that
in,
industry.
Dr. Jen
I'm thinking
Ashton,
about
because it
those
was all
people.
over social
And he could do it
media
not
during the
even in the
debate.
way I'm
A
saying
lot of
it.
people
He could do it in a
noticing
way that sounds like he
that
does
Mike
care
Pence
about
appeared to
them.
have some kind
So
of-
there's like a
Yeah.
Jedi mind
What
trick
did you
he's able to
notice?
do with neoliberalism, which is pretty scary.
Well, George, you're not going to be surprised to hear me say this, but of course, no one can
Maybe
make
turn down the
diagnosis or
chatter
guarantee
Yeah,
of
let me-
the
what do we know about ocular or eye
These people.
Close this. 'Cause we're done with that now.
yeah.
Other commentary, but yeah. Yeah, this was a great tweet.
Oh yeah.
For if you do not
Yeah,
let my people
Obama,
go.
you know, Obama is relatively young still in the grand scheme of things, right? So he's going to continue to be a presence in American politics. But given everything that's happened the past 5 years, it's totally not clear like what that relationship's going to be with the more vanguard left that is pushing for these more idealistic and more substantive policies.
Exactly. And that's the scary thing. Like, fortunately, though, or maybe not, I don't know. We were looking at Buttigieg for a while as being like the next Obama, even in his intonations. And I think he was kind of going for that like radical centrist Jedi mind trick position that Obama was doing. But for some reason, it didn't land. It didn't stick in the same way as Obama did. And maybe this is just because Obama's just a better rhetorician. But I think that's a good thing. There is no real replacement in the Democratic Party for somebody like that. I'm
Yeah,
hoping that
it's
vacuum will mean more progressives can fill that space, but I guess we'll see.
it's so amazing too. I'll just foreground that, you need technicians, you need people like Obama and Buttigieg to do something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's funny that both Obama and Buttigieg in their past were very praiseworthy of Bernie. So like there's a clip of Obama, endorsing Bernie for Senate race or whatever, way back, and it's heartwarming because it's like this is way before the presidency run. And same thing with Pete Buttigieg. He authors this article when he's in high school or whatever it was, and he's like, Bernie Sanders is like a great, it's just this cute, this laudatory piece. And so they're both people who like endorsed Bernie Sanders like much earlier, but then they become kind of corporate, neoliberal, centrist politicians and throw Bernie under the bus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the sad thing about it. But again, I guess we'll see. I have my skepticism just in terms of like how much, even with all of the fighting we've been doing during this primary, like how much the Biden administration is really going to take into serious consideration Bernie's progressive what was even called, like a research thing. There was like some kind of panel they were putting together for like a progressive platform.
Yeah,
Bernie was like consulting
task forces.
Yeah, like how much those task forces are actually going to weigh in with the Biden administration and the Biden cabinet. I have serious skepticism about that, but at the same time, like at least we'll have, like we're saying, like this is the most progressive platform Democrats have run with in its history. So at least there is that, while we're trying to focus more on the down ballot victories, state to state, and at the local level. I mean, your point earlier is like it's still like hitting home, which is like we don't have the time for this, but it seems like the only way to successfully reach our goals is through a very long time in terms of like the down ballot, like years of progressives just outliving centrists, right? Like unseating them, replacing them on the down ballot over many years, and eventually changing the attractor, the center of gravity of the Democratic Party to lean more into the left. And like, I know that's the future. I know it's like the center of gravity for millennials and Zoomers, but we just don't have time for those millennials and Zoomers to reach middle age, and be the majority. We're in the middle of a crisis. So like, I don't know what we do with that. It's like a catch-22.
Yeah.
No matter what we debate right now, it's like we don't have time. So, but not to depress everybody after that stream, but
yeah,
that's what I'm always thinking about. It's like we don't have time. We really don't.
Yeah, and one thing I haven't seen much of in the past 5 years, is people changing. I'm constantly looking for and trying to foster those transformations where people change. Just someone that comes to mind is Peter Dow, and in the last cycle, and in this one, a guy named Ryan Knight. He has a huge podcast platform, and up until sometime earlier this year, he was like just a normal liberal, like for Elizabeth Warren, like everything's great, like kind of progressive values, but not really radical. He didn't get it, and then he switched. It's like a couple events happened, and he realized himself that he was on the wrong team the whole time. And it's a sight to behold, and he's been involved with like the People's Party thing, and just, with his platform helping promote the more radical socialist narrative. Like he's just switched, just very sure of himself, and, has the new narrative. And we don't see that a lot. And I think what has to happen is more and more people need to switch like that.
Yeah, I mean, like not Harvey K, I think Harvey K, because he was just tweeting something. But no, I think that switch is important, but there has to be kind of like a combination of things, right? Like we have No McKee pushing like matriarch, we have the Sunrise Movement, we have Ed Mackey doing his victory, and like I think he's another interesting kind of, because he kind of had a milquetoast kind of, wasn't particularly progressive, but he realized the kind of, well, first of all, he was at stake for losing, right, against Kennedy, but also like he saw the strategic move there, and like, let me actually cater to the populists, the progressive populists, and like reformulate my political like identity around that, and it worked. So like that could be
Markey,
a successful strategy.
Ed Markey, you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, like I didn't know a lot about him, but he's like a lifelong progressive. You know, like he was one of these people, more or less like Bernie, right? They're very senior right now, but like they were active in like the sort of 60s and 70s and 80s, and so it's important that these guys keep leading the vanguard. And Ed Markey was like, along with AOC, like the co-author or co-sponsor of the original introduction of the Green New Deal.
Yeah, and so like conversions, like it just has to be seen as like a strategic victory. And like for the life of me, I've been frustrated by centrists, because very often, very frequently, leaning into the progressive platform, leaning into a populist message actually garners success. It seems to be making a lot of victories in the down ballot. So just like in a purely pragmatic, instrumental way, why isn't this being picked up more, you know? So like, I guess that's my question. Obviously, there's a lot of political influence and political power plays and all that stuff that are probably like on, you know, behind closed doors that are involved in this, but like it seems like that is what we should be focusing on the down ballot, and more centrists should be doing that flip that you're talking about, that conversion. Maybe they will, you know. I mean, it seems to be gaining some momentum, at least what we've been seeing this past year or two. So I don't know, maybe there's still hope, you know. And the energy from the Bernie campaign will hopefully be leveraged rather than dissipated into a kind of political cynicism, you know. And what's that word? The sociology word about like feeling a sense of like cynicism, or not feeling like, you know, our vote is really mattering, and you know, the kind of an alienation from the democratic process.
Well, ennui comes to mind. Is that what you're thinking of?
Probably that word, yeah.
That's to do with like sort of boredom and just existential like detachment.
Yeah, we're all feeling that quite a bit this year, but yeah, there's still hope. There's still hope. And I do think. Well, what do you think? Like, if Biden gets in, like, would that translate into more political energy, just in terms of like the progressive movement?
Yeah, I mean, every day we have to keep pushing, but at the end of the day, every day, you know, we kind of have to accept where people are at, and so you know, Chomsky is sort of a voice of reason when he says like, well, Bernie's campaign was a success. You know, they moved so many people, and the narrative has changed. I'm always like disappointed in the day-to-day kind of narrative of the mainstream media and any kind of mainstream figure. Like, they always retain their power. You know, they don't change enough. And, you know, David Brooks is a pundit who comes up a lot in centrist spaces and in integral spaces.
Yes,
and
he does.
People say, you know, fair enough. They say, yeah, he's come along. He's come a long way. He's evolving with us, you know, and he speaks to a lot of people. And, you know, we have to accept that that's true in some sense. But I get disheartened just that, you know, things aren't actually changing, right? Like, until David Brooks and people like him have a huge metanoia, a huge conversion, and really change, then we're all going to continue to kind of be stuck.
Yeah, and that's the problem, I think. Well, okay, there was a moment in what when Bernie was winning in Arizona, when unions were siding with him during the primary, there was this moment, right, where the mainstream media paused and went like, "Holy shit!" I don't know if I can curse in these streams or not, but like they were surprised by the momentum of the Bernie campaign, and for all intents and purposes, at that moment before Super Tuesday, it was expected that Bernie would be the Democratic frontrunner, and all of a sudden, across all mainstream media, there was all of this sudden like, we have to reckon with this sea change. I don't think we will ever see the Brooks of the world, David Brooks, do that change until that is actually happening, right? Until that is intractable and irreversible. Because as soon as that's irreversible, you can backpedal, you can kind of write it off, you can rationalize it away. But like in that moment where they felt like there was no going back, that was a beautiful moment. That was a beautiful moment to just shift the social imaginary into like, okay, democratic socialism is now a reality in America, and we're just gonna have to start punditing about that, like regardless of whether or not we like that. And God, that was a beautiful moment. That was a sweet spot in this whole. That was a high water mark, but yeah.
Both elections in a row, there was that sort of moment where it came so close, and it didn't make sense to push back against it. Yet, just before Super Tuesday, that's exactly what you have. You have the consolidation of establishment power behind Joe Biden. And, one thing that kind of frustrated me, but I also kind of bought into right before that moment, was all the kind of senility talk about Joe Biden, because he was making an unusual amount of incoherent gaffes and statements. But then when he debated Bernie, he actually upended that narrative. He actually held it together. It's not easy to admit, but it's true. Like what he's on Adderall or whatever. I mean, the effect is that he had it together. He wasn't senile. And so there was like a week or two of that narrative that he's losing his marbles. Like, we can't put our hopes of the Democratic Party future in this guy. But all of that was a lot of hot air. So I had this mixed feeling of being like of agreeing with a lot of it, that he did have mental decline, but also being very skeptical and very doubtful that was true as well, and that it was the correct narrative to lead with. And so it totally backfired.
It totally did. And I think, in some ways, Bernie's preparedness for that particular debate wasn't so great either, because he had been softening all of his rhetoric against Biden. Just everything was my friend. Everything was like, like, we all have common goals here. Let's not really fight each other. And Biden didn't do that. Biden was like, he was gunning for it. He was gunning for Bernie. So, yeah, but that's the unfortunate thing. And I don't know about that rhetoric either. I've oscillated between like concern about Biden's like mental competency and health, and his ability to debate. Like, we've seen it. I don't know if he was given Adderall that night against Bernie and against Trump, but clearly, when the occasion is required of him, he's able to just do his thing like he's always done. And so, yeah, but it's not all Biden's fault. I mean, it's obviously like, if Bernie was just a little bit harder on his opposition here, but that's not who he is, I guess. I mean, I feel like maybe Bernie has like seen his role as like, I've profoundly moved everything to the left. The left is now kind of awakened in the United States. there's a whole progressive movement, a progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and I'm just really going to focus on that rather than, you know, achieving a winnable election at this point after Super Tuesday. And he's shifted. He may have already shifted his own strategic goals at that point, you know. But I don't know. I don't want to be hard on Bernie because I love Bernie and what he's done.
Yeah.
I think the Jacobin Journal issue, just talking about it, like Matt Karp's articles in there, really, really good analysis of just like what a great win this has been for the left, and it's so easy to kind of downplay that. So again, we need to use this as leverage, and a Biden victory would be that kind of leverage to move this forward and not making this go to waste. But
yeah.
But yeah, well, I guess we've come to the end here. We've gone about 2 hours for this discussion, slash, I don't even know what that was. Pence
Sports
and the
night.
Fly. Sports night, Pence and the Fly. Drinking game. But thank you, Brent. This has been really fun. This is our first test live stream of a debate.
Yeah,
and
thank
I think it went
you.
pretty well.
Yeah, and thank you to the 15 odd people in the eCam viewing. At least I don't know if YouTube and Twitch
Yeah, it's like
what
spread
the
out.
metrics are,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's some people watching. So hey, thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you again on Saturday. We're gonna have Matt Segal on, and Brent, we're gonna have you on once again. We should definitely do these live streams more often, so I might be hitting you up next couple of weeks for one of these. Awesome, man. Thank you.
All right,
everybody.
thanks, Jeremy.
Have a good night.